Hello friends and welcome to Stellar Journeys, Episode 5, the series where we go from late 1950s tech all the way to interstellar travel. Starting this episode with a simple rocket, the Arrow 3, this time carrying the last generation of Newton probes bound for Minmus. There wasn't much more to discover around the orbit of Minmus, so this last probe, even though it was designed for orbital maneuvering, was retrofitted later in the workshops to become a lander. Thankfully, due to the extremely low gravity of Minmus, the orbital maneuvering thrusters were all that were necessary to make a perfect landing on the surface of the icy blue moon. Leading us on into the late 60s, we have a new rocket design and a new mission specification, the Arrow 4. Aboard this rocket is a brand new probe named Boone 1. The Arrow 4 explores the idea of an expanded upper stage as well as an expanded lower stage, making it about the size of a Javelin 1. The expanded fuel capacity and thrust-to-weight ratio made Kerbal engineers realize that they can send interplanetary probes further and faster. So, this probe's destination is Duna in 85 days. As the Cold War rages on between the East and the West, the Kerbal Science Organization decides to progress its manned missions further into space. The Javelin 2D is the KSO's solution to both sides' highly expensive and potentially dangerous missions. As is demonstrated here, a Javelin 2C with a Drake orbital maneuvering capsule has plenty of fuel and resources to carry Kerbals to the Moon. The Javelin 2C is almost exactly like a Javelin 2A, except that it has easier to produce solid rocket boosters and saves costs with the orange tanks on the bottom. The lower weight of the Drake 1 capsule means that the Arrow 2C is a perfect vehicle for Kerbal missions to the Moon. Transit would only take approximately 3 days on a full load. Unlike the Columbus capsules, the Drake 1 capsule is outfitted with plenty of radiation shielding within its hull. Drake 1 will spend 3 days in the orbit of the Moon, and then it's time to return home. It was a concern that the Columbus capsules will not provide enough protection for long-term missions to the Moon. The Drake fixes that issue, and crews can almost immediately return home. After a little bit of quarantining, of course. After 9 days in space, the crew of Drake 1 safely return home, giving the green light for future Drake missions. Before the next phase of the Drake program can begin, a new version of the Javelin rocket and a new type of probe must be sent to the Moon to verify some scientific theories. This variant of the Javelin is labeled as 2D. The 2D designation denotes the change in solid rocket booster configuration. Instead of using 2 large SRBs, the 2D uses 4 SRBs similar in style to the ones found on an Arrow 4 rocket. The other biggest change was the addition of the Centurion upper stage. Centurion is to act as a cryogenic upper stage for propelling payloads further into orbit and into the SOI of other celestial bodies. So far, its performance has been a resounding success. Once in a terminal orbit, the payload separates from Centurion. The payload in question is named Lewis, to pair with the prior Clark missions. Just like the pair of legendary explorers, the Lewis probe lands on the surface of the Mun and performs vital scientific data to further our understanding of unknown territory. What separates these probes from the Clark probes is that the Lewis program is supposed to return samples from the surface. The small return capsule is rudimentary in design and does not carry any onboard reaction systems except for the RCS thrusters. This means that for the duration of its journey, it will have to be spin stabilized with what remains of the RCS fuel when landing on the Mun. Before re-entry and signal blackout, the probe is given orders to arm its parachutes. Once the parachutes deploy, the probe lands safely into the ocean, and a GPS locator signal is activated. By late 1968, an Arrow 4 is launched from KSO. This rocket is carrying yet another innovative probe, labeled as Journeyman 1. Another resounding success of a launch of an Arrow 4 rocket proves that the KSO is moving leaps and bounds into a new era of spaceflight. The Journeyman program is a new proposed program to send probes to the far planets of the Kerbal system. Once on the far side of Kerbin, the insulating hull segments separate from the transfer stage and the engine ignites. The second stage engine cuts off, marking the beginning of a long cruise to the planet Jewel. The successful Lewis 1 mission gave Kerbal engineers and scientists a renewed taste for unmanned lunar missions. Along with conducting the second consecutive test of a Javelin 2D rocket, Lewis 2 SRP is launched aboard, going to send more samples back from the Mun. Lewis 2 is a vast improvement over its predecessor, Lewis 1. Firstly, engineers noticed that the Centurion stage had plenty of fuel to perform a terminal braking burn over the surface of the Mun to help guide the probe towards the surface. Secondly, the solar panels on the return capsule were replaced with radioisotopic thermal-electric generators, or RTGs. And third, more resilient solar panels were placed on the descent stage so that they can act as beacons for future missions. Lewis 2 lands hard on the surface of the Mun. The landing apparently damaged the landing gear, of all things. But it's still a job well done for the KSO. Long-term goo capsule is deployed, and the return capsule is armed for launch. The parachutes deploy, marking another successful mission for the KSO. At the beginning of the year in 1970, the KSO finally executes its plan for the contract of a lifetime. The highly successful Javelin 2D, which until now has gone through 4 successful test flights, is nominated to carry the Phoenix 1 MLRV. Centurion cuts its engines after 30 minutes of flight time, putting the Phoenix 1 into a stable orbit over Kerbin. And finally, 2 weeks later, the launch of Drake 3 is given the go-ahead. Drake 3's mission is to dock with the Phoenix 1 and land on the Mun. Drake 3 triumphantly arrives at the orbital position of Phoenix 1. Detecting the craft's signal, the Centurion separates Phoenix 1, and the pair of craft dock together, now ready for transmotor injection. Once Phoenix separates from Drake, the most dangerous and heart-wrenching part of the mission begins. Phoenix 1 must be the first successful craft to land on the surface of the Mun. And finally, after 4 days of flight, Phoenix 1 has touched down on the surface of the Mun. And so begins the next vital chapter of Kerbal spaceflight and space exploration. Audiences on Kerbal are shocked in awe at the beauty of landscape and the feat of Kerbal engineering. It is now apparent that the sky is no longer the limit. But after just a few mere spectacular dreamlike hours, it's time for the astronauts to return home. The Phoenix lander was over-engineered at best, and so it was finally decided that the lander would not only act as, well, the lander, but also as the return vehicle. Once the mission stage had spent all of its fuel, the braking stage would ignite. This procedure would spend all remaining fuel on board, and the crew would return to the Drake capsule for re-entry. Finally, after 8 days in space, the 3 Kerbals aboard would come home as heroes. The rest of the KSO's smaller missions would not gain much traction with the media due to the sheer shock of the landings. And yes, my timing may not be exact, it may not be perfect, it may not even line up right, but I had some mod issues, and so I had to fix that around, and that sort of messed up the save file just a little bit, but here we are. Journeyman 1, after 180 days in flight, arrives in the Julian system. first part of this great journey is to fly by the atmospheric moon of Lathe, which is an innermost moon of the Julian system. Afterwards, Journeyman flies close to Joule before its approach to Val. The photographs, as usual, are stunning and inspire a new generation of kerbal scientists. Val appears to be an icy, rocky world, not too dissimilar from Minmus. Kerbal scientists decide that future exploration missions to Joule are advised. And here we see towards the middle of 1971, Boone 1 arrives in high orbit over Duna. Boone has been assigned a challenging task, but not one that it cannot accomplish. You see, simply landing on a planet is easy enough when applied with the right tools. Boone 1 is equipped with parachutes, engines, and a separable heat shield. Once Boone has been spin stabilized, it separates from its transfer stage and prepares for a massive entry into the atmosphere. The heat shield does great work at slowing Boone down from its whopping 2 km per second down to a more manageable 850. Regardless, that's still not slow enough, so 2 drogue chutes deploy from the top of Boone's aeroshell. The parachutes are nice, but Duna's thin atmosphere makes it difficult to slow down with those alone, so that the heat shield separates and an engine fires. The combination of all 3 successfully decelerates Boone to double-digit velocities. Right on time for the small solar-powered probe to land hard on the surface of Duna. We've been making a lot of hard landings lately. I probably need to practice some. Thank you all very much for watching. This has been a fantastic episode to make, and I hope everybody had a great holiday and New Year's. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to stay updated with future content. And this has been Savius, signing off.